They took away her rifle, called her weak, called her small. But in just 83 seconds, she outlasted them all. If you love stories of courage and strength, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss an inspiring tale. Now, let's dive into the incredible journey of a woman who faced impossible odds and won. In the quiet town of Cedar Creek, where the streets were lined with maple trees and old brick buildings, life moved at its own slow, steady pace. Everyone knew everyone else, and news traveled faster than the wind through the leaves. It was the kind of place where nothing happened until the day Kara Jennings arrived. Kara wasn't from Cedar Creek. She was a stranger, a woman in her early 30s with sharp eyes and a calm, steady walk that spoke of discipline. She wore practical clothes, a simple jacket over faded jeans, and carried herself with a quiet confidence that made some people curious and others wary. The town had heard rumors about her. Some said she was a former military officer who had left the service under mysterious circumstances. Others whispered that she was running from something. But most of the townsfolk just saw her as an outsider, someone who didn't quite belong. Kara had moved into the small house at the edge of town near the old train tracks. It was a modest place, with peeling paint and a garden that needed work. She spent her days quietly fixing it up, working with her hands in the soil and keeping to herself. The children watched from a distance. The adults whispered behind her. Back at the local diner, old men glanced at her over their coffee mugs, shaking their heads. "Who does she think she is, coming here like she owns the place?" muttered one. "A woman alone in these parts? Doesn't add up." One afternoon, Kara walked into the town square, carrying a small toolbox. She paused by the bulletin board, reading the notices pinned there. A few curious eyes followed her, then laughter broke out nearby. "That's her, the tough girl from nowhere," said a man, loud enough for her to hear. "Bet she couldn't even handle a real fight," another chuckled. "Without a rifle, she wouldn't last 5 seconds." Kara felt the words, but said nothing. She turned and walked on, the laughter fading behind her. It wasn't the first time she had been underestimated, and it wouldn't be the last. But inside, something stirred. She wasn't here to make friends. She was here for a reason. The reason was buried deep in her past, something she never spoke about. Before Cedar Creek, Kara had served in a special operations unit. She had been trained to stay calm under fire, to act fast, to protect. She had faced danger countless times, survived impossible odds. But when she left the service, it wasn't because she wanted to. It was because of a betrayal that cut deeper than any wound, a betrayal from within her own team. That past was a shadow she carried silently. Cedar Creek was supposed to be a place where she could heal, where she could disappear. But fate had other plans. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the sky turned to soft shades of pink and orange, Kara heard shouting from the main street. She stepped outside her house just in time to see a group of men, 5 of them harassing a young woman near the corner store. The woman's voice was shaking. The men were bigger, rougher, and clearly used to getting their way. They jeered and laughed, blocking her path. Kara's heart tightened. She knew she should walk away. After all, this was not her fight. Not yet, but something inside her snapped. Without thinking, she stepped forward. "Leave her alone," she said, her voice calm but firm. The men turned, surprise flickering in their eyes. "And who are you?" sneered the tallest one. "Some kind of hero?" Kara didn't answer. Her hand brushed against her jacket pocket, where she usually carried her rifle. But today, the rifle was gone. Confiscated at the town's makeshift checkpoint, an old rule. Meant to keep things civilized. She was unarmed. The men laughed. One stepped closer, pushing her roughly. "Looks like we don't have to worry about her," he said. Just a little lady with no firepower. But Kara was no ordinary woman. Her training kicked in. She moved fast, faster than the men expected. With no weapon, she relied on what she had: her strength, her speed, her skill. In 83 seconds, she had taken down all 5 men. Not a shot was fired. Not a single one of them saw it coming. The townsfolk, who watched later, would say it was like watching a storm quiet at first, then overwhelming. And just like that, Kara Jennings was no longer the outsider. This was just the beginning. The news of what happened that evening spread quickly through Cedar Creek. By the next morning, everyone knew the story. A lone woman, unarmed, had taken down 5 men who were known troublemakers in town. The story grew with each retelling. Some said she moved like lightning. Others swore she had superhuman strength. But the truth was simpler and stronger. Kara was trained, focused, and determined. At first, many still refused to believe it. How could a woman, without a rifle or any weapon, face off against 5 grown men and come out unscathed? Some in town openly doubted her, calling her lucky or accusing her of exaggeration. The men she had taken down certainly didn't make themselves look innocent, but their families and friends quickly branded Kara as trouble. Inside, Kara felt the weight of all those eyes on her. The whispers, the glances, the half-hidden scorn, they were hard to ignore. She was strong, yes, but she was also alone. No one had come to her defense. The local sheriff, a gruff man named Hank Collins, had made it clear he preferred things quiet and under his control. Kara's act of defiance, even if justified, had stirred a hornet's nest. At the diner, Kara sat quietly at a corner table, nursing a cup of black coffee. The morning crowd stared, some openly sneering, others whispering about what she'd done. An old man at the counter muttered, "A woman shouldn't be picking fights. It's not proper." Kara ignored it all. She wasn't here to please anyone. But the tension was growing. That afternoon, the 5 men, though injured and humiliated, weren't done. They had family and friends who wanted answers. They sent warnings notes slipped under doors, cold glares at the grocery store, cars circling her neighborhood at night. That one evening, as the sun was setting, Kara was repairing her garden fence when a car slowly rolled past her house. Inside were 2 of the men she'd taken down. They didn't say anything, just stared. Kara met their gaze without flinching. Inside her, the fire of her past burned quietly but fiercely. She had faced worse in faraway places, but this was different. This was her new home, a place she had hoped would be safe. That night, sleep was elusive. Memories of betrayal came back, the faces of teammates who had turned against her, the whispered lies, the endless doubts cast on her character. She knew what it meant to be underestimated, dismissed because of who she was, or what others thought she should be. The next day, Kara went to the town council meeting. She stood before the room filled with faces both curious and hostile. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said, her voice steady. "I'm here to protect myself and others. What happened the other night was necessary." The mayor, a stout man named Harold Green, cleared his throat. "We appreciate what you did, Kara, but this town has rules. We don't want violence." Kara nodded. "I understand. But sometimes standing by quietly lets danger grow." A few heads nodded in agreement, but others shook their heads, unwilling to change old views. Later that week, Kara started training with the local youth at the community center. She taught self-defense, discipline, and confidence skills she wished she had learned when she was younger. Slowly, some people began to see her differently, not just the woman who took down 5 men in 83 seconds, but a protector, a teacher, and a neighbor. But not everyone wanted her there. One evening, as Kara walked home from the center, she found a message spray-painted on her front door: "Leave now or else." The threat was clear. Kara's heart raced not from fear, but from resolve. She wasn't going anywhere. She had already sacrificed too much to disappear again. Her fight was just beginning. The threat spray-painted on Kara's door was more than just a warning. It was a challenge. But Kara Jennings was no stranger to challenges. The years she had spent in service had taught her how to face danger with a clear mind and a steady heart. The next morning, she stood on her porch and looked at the faded message. It wasn't just paint on wood. It was the voice of a town still struggling to accept her. But Kara was determined to earn their respect, not through words, but through her actions. She began by reaching out to Sheriff Hank Collins. Though their relationship was tense, she knew law and order were his responsibility. "I want to help," she said plainly when she met him at the sheriff's office. Hank raised an eyebrow. "Help? You mean stirring things up?" "No," Kara replied calmly. "I mean protecting this town, like I said at the council. These men, those who threaten me, they're not just troublemakers. They're a danger to everyone." Hank studied her for a moment, then sighed. "I'm watching. You, Kara, but if you're right, maybe it's time to act." With Hank's cautious backing, Kara began organizing community watch groups and self-defense classes at the center. More townspeople came, curious at first, then eager. The local youth, especially, found in Kara a mentor they hadn't had before. As the weeks passed, the threats didn't stop, but they became less brazen. The 5 men she had confronted initially avoided her, but their friends still lurked in shadows. One evening, as Kara closed up the center, a group of those men's relatives confronted her in the parking lot. "Why don't you just leave?" One sneered. "This town isn't for you." Kara met their hostile stares without backing down. "Because I'm not afraid," she said. "And because this town needs someone to stand up when others won't." The tension was thick, but before things escalated, Sheriff Collins arrived with backup. The men scattered. Later, Kara and Hank talked quietly in his office. "You've changed things around here," Hank admitted. "But not everyone's ready for it." Kara nodded. Change is never easy. Behind the scenes, Kara kept digging into the roots of the town's unrest. She learned about old grudges, hidden crimes, and corruption that had festered for years. The very people opposing her were tied to these secrets. One name kept coming up: a wealthy local businessman who seemed untouchable. Rumors said he was involved in illegal activities, protected by a few key players, including some in law enforcement. Kara realized her fight wasn't just about defending herself. It was about exposing the truth and bringing justice to Cedar Creek. But doing that would come at a price. She had to prepare not just her body, but her mind and heart. Because the closer she got to the truth, the more dangerous things would become. Her solitude deepened. Friends were few, but those who stood with her were loyal. Among them was a young reporter named Emily, who had recently returned to Cedar Creek to care for her aging mother. Emily admired Kara's courage and promised to help uncover the town's secrets. Together, they began piecing together evidence, careful not to alert those who wished to keep their crimes hidden. One night, as Kara reviewed documents in her small living room, the power suddenly went out. The house plunged into darkness. Kara's heart beat faster. She knew the risks she was taking. Then, footsteps approached. She reached instinctively for the rifle she hadn't carried in weeks. The town's rules didn't allow it, but she had hidden one away, just in case. The footsteps stopped outside her window. A shadow moved. Kara held her breath. The past was closing in, but she was ready. The darkness wrapped around Kara's house like a heavy blanket, broken only by the faint glow of moonlight filtering through the curtains. The footsteps outside her window were slow and deliberate, the kind that carried menace. Kara's fingers tightened around the rifle she had hidden beneath the bed. An old habit she never abandoned despite the town's rules. Her breath was steady. She wasn't about to let fear control her. The shadow lingered a moment longer, then retreated into the night. Kara exhaled slowly, heart pounding but mind sharp. This wasn't just a warning anymore. It was an act of intimidation. A message from those who wanted her gone. She called Sheriff Hank Collins first thing in the morning. "Hank, someone's been near my house last night. I'm not sure what they're after, but it's getting serious." There was a pause. "I'll send some deputies to keep an eye on things," Hank promised, his tone a mix of concern and frustration. "This town's got its secrets, Kara. You're stirring the hornet's nest." She knew that well. But she wasn't about to stop. Days passed, but the tension only thickened. Kara's neighbors kept their distance, some openly warning her to back off, others watching silently, waiting to see what would happen next. Emily, the young reporter, was relentless in her pursuit of the truth. They met often, huddled over files and notes, piecing together the connections that bound the town's respected leaders to crimes they'd never imagined. One afternoon, Emily brought a breakthrough. "We found bank records showing illegal payments," Emily whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. "And it all points to that businessman you mentioned, the one everyone's afraid of." Kara nodded. "We need proof, something undeniable." Together, they planned a risky move and attempt to get hard evidence by sneaking into the businessman's office after hours. Kara's military training kicked in. She moved silently through the shadows that night, the city lights of Cedar Creek twinkling faintly in the distance. Every step was calculated, every breath controlled. Inside the office, the air was thick with secrets. Files, ledgers, and computers held the answers they needed. But just as Kara found a hidden folder marked "Confidential," the door creaked open. 5 men stood there, faces hard and unyielding. They were the businessman's enforcers, no doubt. Kara's heart raced, but she stayed calm. They underestimated her because she was a woman, because they thought she was unarmed. But she had learned to fight without a weapon long ago. What happened? Next was a blur of movement. In just 83 seconds, Kara had taken down all 5 men with precision and speed. She didn't use the rifle. She had no need. When it was over, she stood alone in the silent office. Breath steady, heart pounding. She gathered the files and left quietly. The next day, Kara and Emily met with the sheriff, laying out the evidence. Hank looked grim. "This changes everything." Within days, arrests were made. The businessman and several officials were taken into custody. The town of Cedar Creek was shaken to its core. But Kara's journey was far from over. The respect she earned came slowly, and not without scars. Some still doubted her. Others whispered that her past made her dangerous. But the woman who had taken down 5 men in just 83 seconds without a rifle had shown everyone one undeniable truth. Strength wasn't about weapons. It was about courage, heart, and the will to stand for what's right. With the arrests shaking Cedar Creek's foundations, the town was finally forced to confront its hidden darkness. The businessman and his network had long used fear and influence to control the community. But Kara Jennings had broken that chain. For Kara, the victory was bittersweet. The town's grudges hadn't vanished overnight. Some residents still whispered behind her back, calling her an outsider who had stirred up trouble. The old prejudice ran deep. Yet others, especially the younger generation, began to see her as a symbol of strength and justice. At the community center, Kara's classes grew. More women and men came to learn how to defend themselves, to stand strong. The town was slowly changing. One afternoon, Kara received a visit from a man she hadn't seen since her arrival, a grizzled veteran named Tom, a man well respected in Cedar Creek. He was quiet but kind, with eyes that held years of wisdom and pain. "I'm sorry. I doubted you," Tom said, his voice low. You did what no one else could. Kara smiled softly. It's not about me. It's about what this town needs. Tom nodded. And you've given us hope. That hope wasn't without cost. Kara still carried the scars of betrayal from her past military life. The pain of being misunderstood, even by those she trusted most, was a wound she had hidden deep. But Cedar Creek was helping her heal, slowly but surely. Yet beneath the surface, not everyone had accepted the new reality. The arrested businessman's allies were quietly regrouping. Rumors of retaliation floated in the air like a storm waiting to break. One evening, as Kara walked home from the diner, a figure stepped out from the shadows. It was one of the men she had fought months ago, this time, with a cold smile instead of a sneer. "You think you won, huh?" he said quietly. "This isn't over." Kara met his gaze without fear. "Neither am I." The words carried weight. It wasn't just a promise. It was a warning. Days later, Kara found herself sitting on her porch, watching the sun set behind the hills. The sky was painted in deep oranges and purples, a quiet beauty contrasting the tension that still lingered. Emily joined her, handing over a fresh cup of coffee. "You're going to be okay," Emily said gently. "You've already changed so much here," Kara sighed. "I hope so. But this town taught me something important. It's not just about fighting the bad guys. It's about fighting for the people who believe in you, even when it's hard." Emily smiled. "And you've got plenty of people on your side now." For the first time since she'd arrived, Kara allowed herself a small, hopeful smile. Her journey wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about belonging. But as night fell over Cedar Creek, Kara knew the real test was yet to come. Because standing up for justice sometimes means facing the darkness alone and finding the strength to shine through it. The days after that quiet sunset brought a new kind of tension to Cedar Creek. The town was no longer a place where fear ruled quietly in the shadows. Kara's fight had brought things into the open, and not everyone was ready for that kind of change. One morning, as Kara opened the door to her small garden, she found a letter slipped under the mat. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the message was clear. "Leave now, or worse will follow." It wasn't the first threat, but this time it felt different, more personal, colder. Kara's heart tightened, but she didn't show it. Instead, she folded the note carefully and placed it in her pocket dot at the sheriff's office. She handed the letter to Hank Collins. "We can't let this intimidate us," Kara said firmly. Hank nodded. The worry lingered in his eyes. "We're beefing up patrols. You'll have protection." But Kara knew that no amount of deputies could shield her from what was coming. The real danger wasn't just outside. It was the doubt and fear inside people's hearts. That week, Kara began training. Harder. Each move was precise and controlled, a dance of survival she had mastered long ago. But this time, she wasn't just preparing for a fight. She was preparing to stand as a symbol for those who couldn't defend themselves. Her classes at the community center were full, but Kara could sense the unease behind some faces. She saw parents hesitate before letting their children come, and elders whisper about the risks. One afternoon, Emily approached her with a cautious smile. "Some people want to meet with you," she said. Quietly, "They want to talk." Kara raised an eyebrow. "Who?" "Folks who believe in what you're doing, but they're afraid to show it openly." That evening, under the cover of twilight, Kara met with a small group of townsfolk in a hidden corner of the local park. They spoke quietly, sharing stories of past injustices, hopes for the future, and fears they had kept locked away. Among them was an elderly woman named Margaret, whose family had been hurt by the businessman's corruption years before. Her voice shook as she spoke. "I want to thank you for fighting for us," Margaret said. "We've been silent too long." Kara listened, feeling the weight of their pain and the strength of their hope. This was why she stayed, But not everyone was ready to listen. The businessman's remaining allies grew bolder. One night, Kara's garden was vandalized, the flowers trampled, the fence broken. The message was unmistakable. Kara stood amid the destruction, pain burning in her chest. But it was quickly replaced by resolve. She would not be broken. In the days that followed, Kara's classes became more than lessons in self-defense. They became gatherings of community, of trust, of shared strength. And slowly the town began to shift. Neighbors who once ignored each other started talking. The youth, once restless and lost, found purpose. The old grudges that had kept Cedar Creek divided began to heal. Kara knew the road ahead was long and uncertain, but in her heart, she carried a simple truth. Courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was the choice to face it anyway. The air in Cedar Creek had shifted. What once felt like a town weighed down by fear and secrets now buzzed quietly with cautious hope. Kara could feel it in the way neighbors nodded at each other, in the children laughing in the streets, and in the way the community center was filled with eager faces every evening. But beneath that fragile calm, the past still lingered like a shadow waiting for the right moment to strike. One morning, Kara received an unexpected visit. It was Hank Collins, the sheriff, looking unusually serious. "Kara, we've got word that some of the businessman's associates are planning something." "Something big," he said in a low voice. Kara's heart tightened. "How soon?" "Could be tonight." That evening, as the town's streetlights flickered on, Kara prepared herself. She wasn't just ready to defend her home. She was ready to protect the town that had slowly come to trust her. Emily was by her side, steady and determined. They had worked hard to expose the corruption, but this was the moment when those who resisted change would make their last stand. The night was thick with tension. A sudden crash shattered the quiet. Flames flickered in the distance. Someone had set fire to the community center. Kara's breath caught. Without hesitation, she ran toward the blaze. The townspeople followed, their fear replaced by determination. Inside the burning building, Kara heard voices, men trying to destroy what she had built. She stepped forward. Fearless. In the chaos, she faced the attackers, unarmed but unwavering. The fight was brutal but swift. Kara moved with the precision and strength that had become her signature. The men fell one by one, their resolve broken by the woman they had underestimated. When the last man was down, Kara stood tall amid the smoke and flames. The town was watching, no longer with doubt, but with awe. In the days that followed, Cedar Creek came together like never before. The community center was rebuilt, stronger and brighter, a symbol of resilience. Kara's classes grew, drawing people from nearby towns. She was no longer just the woman who took down 5 men in 83 seconds. She was the heart of Cedar Creek's new beginning. At the rebuilt center, Kara stood before a crowd, her voice steady and clear. "All faced darkness," she said, "but together we found the light." Her words were met with cheers and applause. Late that evening, as the crowd dispersed, Hank approached her. "You earned this, Kara. Not just respect, but a place in this town." Kara smiled softly. "It wasn't just me. It was all of us." For the first time, she truly felt at home. The journey had been long and hard. There were scars, losses, and moments of doubt. But Kara Jennings had proven one thing beyond all else. Strength isn't about weapons or power. It's about heart, courage, and standing up for what's right even when the odds are against you. And in Cedar Creek, her story was just the beginning. The morning sun rose over Cedar Creek with a quiet brilliance, casting warm light on a town that had been through its darkest hours and come out stronger. For Kara Jennings, that morning was more than just the start of a new day. It was a milestone, marking the end of one journey and the beginning of another. Over the months since the fire, the town had healed in ways no one thought possible. The community center stood proudly, its walls painted with murals that told stories of resilience, courage, and hope. Inside, children laughed and learned. Adults gathered to share their lives. And Kara taught self-defense classes that filled with eager students every evening about her story, the woman who took down 5 men in just 83 seconds without a rifle head. Become legend. But to Kara, it was never about the fight. It was about what came after. Trust, understanding, and belonging. One afternoon, as Kara walked through the town square, she noticed faces smiling at her, some with newfound respect, others with quiet gratitude. The old barriers of doubt and suspicion were breaking down. At the local diner, Tom, the veteran who had once doubted her, raised his coffee cup in a silent salute as she passed. Kara returned the gesture with a warm smile. Later that day, Kara met with Emily in the community center's small office. Emily held a folder with fresh articles detailing the ongoing cleanup and reform in Cedar Creek. Stories of justice, change, and hope were making a difference, Emily said, her eyes shining. Kara nodded. This town deserves that. We all do. But beneath the calm, Kara never forgot the journey that had brought her here. The pain of being underestimated, the loneliness of fighting alone, the sacrifices made in the name of justice. She had learned that true strength wasn't just physical, it was emotional and spiritual. It was the ability to face the worst, keep moving forward, and inspire others to do the same. That evening, at the community center, the town gathered for a celebration, not just for the rebuilding, but for the courage that had rebuilt the spirit of Cedar Creek. Kara stood before the crowd, her voice steady and filled with emotion. We all have battles, she said softly, some visible, some hidden. But no matter what we face, we can choose to stand strong, to protect each other, and to build a better tomorrow. The applause was thunderous. As the night sky stretched overhead, dotted with stars, Kara felt a deep peace settle within her. She was no longer just a fighter or a stranger in a town. She was part of something bigger, a community that had found its soul. And in that moment, Kara Jennings knew she had finally come home.